And so we find ourselves in these lectures giving speeches and prepared words to crowds usually as big as 25. And you have shown that Saginaw's community is a much more thriving example of support for the arts just by your presence and by your breath and your life being in this room. So I thank you a great deal for your presence here. The concert we're doing tonight is called Once Upon a Time. And I want to give you an idea of how I conceived of what I think of, admittedly, as a very, very crazy programming idea. When I was a kid, in the summers, I would spend my time with my grandparents and a little bit with my mother. My mother worked during the day, and we lived with my grandparents. And the first words I would hear were, "I can't get 'em up, I can't get 'em up, I can't get 'em up in the morning." And my grandfather would sing this song to me, and I would beg for 5 more minutes. And so he would just walk out singing that song. And I would hear the song going through all the corridors of the house as he was preparing to bring the house into existence again for the new day. I can't get 'em up, I can't get 'em up, I can't get 'em up in the morning. And that transition from being in a dream state to enter the world of reality suddenly became laden with a bed of flower petals known as that song. Each one of those pitches was just a tiny dream, a gate of music into the day. We would eat breakfast, and I was a master chef at age 6, and I would do things. I would make my own creations, so that when my mother came home, I would say, "Oh my goodness, you will never believe what I came up with. Have you ever had, listen, bread with butter?" Of course, she's been doing that for years, but I had just discovered it. It was discovered by me. So the next time you put butter on your toast, you're welcome. That really did happen. So after breakfast, I would travel with my grandfather to my great-grandmother's house. And outside there was a long, thin patch of grass that my grandfather had completely gutted up. He took up the soil, turned it over, and turned it into this sprawling garden. I grew up in the south of Baltimore, in Cherry Hill, the most crime-ridden city at the time, community in the city of Baltimore, and yet I was able to get my hands into the soil, and I was able to pick up a carrot from the ground and able to see the connection from myself and the work that I was doing and that my grandfather was doing to the actual food that I was eating in the city. And he would tell me stories, and he would continue to sing throughout the day. And in the afternoon, I'd come back for lunch to my home, and my grandmother would be watching what she called her stories. They're not yours, they're her stories. All the while, even if she was playing Scrabble, if she was cooking or anything like that, she was paying rapt attention to every single jewel of these stories, these soap operas, Guiding Light, etc. And I figured out why, because when my mother came home, apparently she had been watching the same stories at work, and they would get into heated discussions about why Victoria left Robert for who, and whose baby was that, and could you believe, and no, she did that because that was the whole afternoon for me, filled with these stories. And in bed, at nighttime, I had the gift of an LP player, a record player. For those of you who are any younger than me, we used to have our computer-based music on large discs. Okay, so anyway, I would play the whatever records I had. I had maybe 2 or 3 of them, and so a lot of times I would wake up to the scratch of the needle hitting the end of the music. rolling around and revolving around. And I noticed when planning this season, I happened to be reflecting on my childhood. My grandfather, when I was planning this, my grandfather had passed away a year ago before that. And I was thinking, wow, what a fortunate, blessed childhood I had to have my days bookshelved with song and to have the middle of my days filled with stories. And so I have created Once Upon a Time to reflect that in honor of my mother, in honor of my grandmother, in honor of my grandfather. We create a series of stories for you tonight. The stories are in 4 chapters. The chapters are called 1, Saint Elsewhere, 2, Guiding Light, 3, Another World, and 4, The Young. I can hear some of you going, yeah, no, those are my stories. So let's explore each one of them in a little bit of detail. The first one, Saint Elsewhere. Did anybody watch Saint Elsewhere, by the way? All right, fantastic. Okay, Saint Elsewhere. The first chapter is an exploration of other worlds than we find ourselves in today. We open the concert with Double, Double, Toil and Trouble, taken from William Shakespeare's opening scene, where witches in, I'm going to say it in a theater, in the play Macbeth. That's a bad luck omen, by the way. You're not supposed to say that word in a theater, but I'm defying it tonight. In the beginning of Macbeth, we see a witch's cauldron, and witches all around the cauldron, and they're putting the eye of a newt and the toe of a frog and the wool of a bat and the tongue of a dog into this pot, and they're mixing it, making some mysterious magical potion that we'll learn about later in the play. A world that we really, I hope, can't relate too much to. I certainly have made better soups than that. The Finnish composer Jaakko Mantijärvi sets this text, Double, Double, Toil and Trouble, in a very interesting way that gives us a feel into the off-kilterness, into the disjunction, and into the constant winding of attention that is required of this wicked, wicked text. We're used to dealing with groups of 2 and groups of 3 in music. We're used to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Would you say it with me? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That sounds very stable to us. It's like walking. Or we're used to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So Mantijärvi, the composer who's still alive today, takes 8 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And he sets the stressed beats off by 1, so that we constantly feel like we can't get a hold of the time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Double, double, toil and trouble. Fire, burn, and cauldron bubble. You have no idea where you are, and then the piece just spits you out. It's in a binary form, ABA we call it, because the first section is fast. The second section is a bit slower. It sounds nothing like the first section, and then we return to something that sounds like the first section at the beginning. A wonderment of time, a change of meters all going on to give us the impression that we can't really get a hold of this world that we're suddenly in. The next is called Ghost Riders in the Sky. It's many of you may know this tune, probably from the Johnny Cash recording, but it's also been recorded on Sesame Street. The tune is from 1948. Stan Jones, the songwriter, the post office worker, the park ranger, the firefighter, the miner, all of these things in one, was traveling around the United States, I imagine, trying to find what his vocation was in life when he was discovered by John Ford, the director who was so famous for Westerns and worked with John Wayne, as a matter of fact, throughout his career. He finds the songwriter Stan Jones, interestingly enough, while he's working as a park ranger, and says, come on down to California. And that's when Stan Jones starts writing pieces for him and writing pieces for his films. So the next time you see one of those John Wayne movies, it's increasingly likely that you'll have a song by Stan Jones involved. This particular song is his most famous, Ghost Riders in the Sky, and it details a cowboy riding along the road and seeing above him suddenly a dark, brooding band of cattle and horses with cowboys on top of them riding through the dark and raging sky. This arrangement that we'll sing today takes away the very last verse, which tells us the moral of the story. Why he was seeing those dark horses, why he was seeing them running, charging through the sky. The moral of the story is that if you don't want to spend your life chasing those mysterious beasts in the sky, if you want to save your life from hell, that's what the second line says, then you had better get yourself together, get your religious self together. And the arrangement, I think, leaves it out for logical reasons so that it can be used for a wider array of purposes. The tune is based on When Johnny Comes Marching Home, you know, and the tune has been changed to da 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 ba 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 bum bum ba da 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 ba 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 dum bum ba 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 dum bum. All of those leaps that sound like trumpets give us a martial quality to the way it works. The next piece is the Debussy. Yes?
Frankie Lane.
Yes.
That was the one who had the big hit.
Is that right?
Singing that.
Okay.
Frankie Lane.
You know, it's been recorded over 80 times. And so I was looking through the list of the amount that it's been recorded, and it's interesting to me that Johnny Cash and Sesame Street are the only two that wound up on my...
It shows the generation gap.
Yeah. I see. It takes a whole village, right? Debussy, the late 19th and the beginning of the 20th century composer, sets three pieces he calls trois chansons, three songs. They're not related, except they are all poems of Charles d'Orléans. Charles of Orleans was the Duke of Orleans from 1407, following the murder of his father, Louis I, and who was also Duke there. And on the orders of John the Fearless, the Duke of Burgundy, he was also a poet who wrote quite a bit. And Debussy takes three of these songs. The first one being a love song. The third, perhaps being more appropriate to the day, the title is "Winter, You Are Nothing But a Villain." But the second movement is what we'll sing today, and it's in our Saint Elsewhere. A woman is on the second floor apartment of her Parisian home, and she hears out of the window a parade going on, and it's a Saturday, and she's not a morning person. And she sings as the tambourine annoyingly finds its way into her eardrums through the window. She sings, "I would rather go back to sleep right now." And that's the whole point of the thing. It's so French, isn't it? To stay on that one moment. And just like the French at the turn of the century, Debussy is mixing old traditions. The chanson has been in the French tradition of music making for 500 years. And yet the use of harmonic scales, harmonic falling scales. La, 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 la. You'll hear in the basses, la, 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 la. Sounds like a low brass instrument of the Renaissance, and yet he changes it later to reflect the forward thinking. La 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 la, to give it a little brightness, to continue annoying that woman in that Parisian apartment, to wake up. It's time for the parade. I feel her pain. The second chapter is Guiding Light. And there are three songs that I chose because they have to do with someone reaching out somewhere far beyond them in order to gain inspiration. The first, Dear Sarah, the text is taken from a Civil War letter written from Sullivan Ballou, who was a lawyer and politician and enlisted himself in the army at the request of Lincoln, who was looking for 20,000 troops after a particularly bloody battle. He writes this just a week before he enters into the first battle of Bull Run, and he dies. And the music for us reflects that prosaic approach. He's writing a letter to his sweetheart, to his wife. It gives us free-floating rhythms, just like a recitative, as if it were just talking, which makes it very difficult for the singers, but once the singers tackle all of the rhythms, it sounds as if you're just being talked to. The hazy couplets that you'll hear, which sound oddly like Meet George Jetson. Listen for them. This is how we'll remember. Indicate not a stability, but a continuous winding, a wondering, a feeling of loss, a feeling of not knowing where to go as it incessantly repeats over the words of Sullivan Ballou. Here are a few of his words. My very dear Sarah, the indications are very strong that we will move in a few days, perhaps tomorrow. Lest I should not be able to write you again, I feel impelled to write lines that may fall under your eye when I shall be no more. But, oh Sarah, if the dead can come back to this earth and flit unseen around those they loved, I shall always be near you, in the brightest day and in the darkest night, amidst your happiest scenes and gloomiest hours, always, always. And if there be a soft breeze upon your cheek, it shall be my breath, as the cool air fans your temple. It shall be my spirit passing by. We segue into the Scottish tale Loch Lomond, which has a very similar story. We don't quite know the origin of Loch Lomond, but there is the speculation that it comes from two soldiers captured in the Jacobite Rebellion of 1745. The Jacobite Rebellion was the attempt to regain the British throne for the exiled House of Stuart. You know, the houses and dynasties pass back and forward, and you could gain royalty for yourself if you just killed the current monarch and installed your family. It's not as easy as I make it sound in prose, of course, but now the House of Stuart is trying to get that absolute monarchy back to the Kingdom of Great Britain. These two soldiers are captured. One is sentenced to die, and one is released. Ye'll take the high road, and I'll take the low road. And I'll get to Scotland afore ye. The high road, symbolizing the passage of death. The low road, the long road, symbolizing the hills, the valleys, the mountains that had to be traversed in the physical world in order to get back to the kingdom, to the place of Scotland. And so you'll take the high road, I'll take the low road. We'll get there. And I'll see you. I'll never meet you again, but I will see you. Jonathan Quick, in his arrangement, uses martial percussion techniques in order to accomplish this feeling of war. Die, die, da da die, 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 da da die, die, die. Da da die die da da die die, and that quick, very Scottish sounding rhythm, da da die die die, is present all through the arrangement. City Called Heaven ends the first half of the piece, and it's near and dear to my heart because it comes to us from the land of gospel, which means it is thoroughly, thoroughly American music. It is at the foundation of our American music. And interestingly enough, the tune was the first spiritual that I had ever sung in public. I am a poor pilgrim of sorrow. I'm lost in this wide world alone. No hope have I for tomorrow. And here's the guiding light. I've decided to make heaven my home. Sometimes I'm tossed and driven. Sometimes I don't know where to roam. But I've heard of a city called heaven, and I've decided to make it my home. Set in 3 parts, soprano, alto, tenor, set just like a gospel choir with parallel moving triads, and underneath an added bass line to give fullness and richness to the texture. You'll take an intermission. I'll just get new scores. And we'll meet on the other side when we enter into another world. The first choruses of Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim. I will admit, since I programmed Sondheim stories in May, I've just been looking for as many excuses to get Sondheim on as many programs as possible. And this is a good one. Into the Woods debuted in 1986 in San Diego, California. And since then, it's been revived in major ways. Even in 2012, at the New York Outdoor Shakespeare in the Park Festival, there was Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods. It won the Tony for that year for Best Score, Best Actress for Joanna Gleason, if there are any Joanna Gleason fans, Best Book, in a year dominated by Phantom of the Opera. It intertwines the Brothers Grimm fairy tales. The Brothers Grimm, how many of you have heard of the Brothers Grimm? Great, heard of the fairy tales? Yes. The Brothers Grimm, 18th century German brothers who penned Cinderella and Rapunzel and Jack and the Beanstalk and Little Red Riding Hood, etc., etc., etc. Sondheim takes these stories, intertwines them so that they work together as one story. And then he makes an entire other story on top of that to be the skeleton around which the Brothers Grimm fairy tale characters interact. The overarching story is about a childless baker who is cursed by a witch and is looking for a way to get rid of the curse so that he can have a child, wanting a family, and interacting on his way, on his adventures with those characters in the woods, the Cinderellas, the Rapunzels. The next piece on the program is from, the text is from Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This piece comes to us in the 5th chapter of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, where Alice is complaining to the caterpillar that she's having trouble with pronouncing words, and she just can't get them right. And so the caterpillar, of all things, gives her an English elocution lesson. She says, repeat after me, "You are old, Father William." And she says, "You are old, Father William." Well, that "you are old, Father William" is actually taken from the 19th century English poet, Robert Southey. Listen. "You are old, Father William," the young man cried, "and pleasures with youth pass away. And yet you lament not the days that are gone. Now tell me the reason, I pray." "In the days of my youth," Father William replied, "I remembered that youth could not last. I thought of the future, whatever I did, that I never might grieve for the past." So, Lewis Carroll takes that and sillifies it, is what I call when you make something sillier. You are old, Father William, the young man said, and your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right? In my youth, Father William replied to his son, I feared it might injure the brain, but now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again. Pure imagination comes to us from the film in 1971, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and written by British actors and songwriters Leslie Briseus and Anthony Newley for the film. It's sung by Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder, if you're trying to rack your brain for that name. The melody is delightfully simple, and it returns. I encourage you to listen for that slow returning trill. Bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, ba, bum, bum. It's in all of the phrases. If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. It's as if whimsy is crafted slowly and carefully, like folded chocolate into ice cream into the root and the texture of this song. Finally, the young and the restless. This was my favorite, by the way. I think it was just because of the way that the program opened, Young and the Restless. It had that nice Y and the R that went like this, and really exciting music. It was terrible music, but it was really exciting. It was great. Memory lane, folks. Landscapes is by Eric Lane Barnes, a composer and a founder of a vocal comedy troupe called Captain Smarty Pants. He sets the nursery rhyme that we know as Mary Had a Little Lamb, and he sets it in 4 ways. First, in Gregorian chant, in Latin, Maria Agnelum. 2, as Handel's Hallelujah chorus. 3, as Schubert's song Erlkönig, the Earl King, which is played, by the way, brilliantly by our pianist tonight, Catherine McMichael. And 4, Verdi, Brindisi from La Traviata. You will hear the wretched parody. I'll save it for your own ears. It's fantastic in how direct it is and how hilarious it is. The next Soldier, Soldier, Won't You Marry Me was collected in 1903, and the origin is possibly and probably British. It originated in 4/4. Soldier, 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 won't you marry me? It's a fife and a drum. This setting gives a little bit of impatience, growing impatience on the part of the woman. Soldier, soldier, won't you marry me? It's a fife and a drum. He responds, how can I marry such a pretty girl with no hat to put on? Off to the tailor she did run as fast as she could go. Brought him back the finest was there. Now soldier, put it on. Finally, soldier, soldier, won't you marry me? It's a fife and a drum. How can I marry such a pretty girl with a wife and baby at home? Off to the tailor she did run. Off to the... with a wife and baby at home? It makes sense now that it's in 3. Soldier, 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 boy, to give a feeling of rush, and then it switches into 5 beats. Off to the tailor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as it constantly falls out of balance and tumbles over itself, just the way the woman tumbles to the tailor to get the fixins for her wedding that will never happen. And we end with the piece Mata dell'anima sola, which speaks of Cantaclaro, which you may know as Chanticleer, which comes to us from The Nun's Priest Tale. A version of Chanticleer appears in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. We talk about the night and finding ourselves underneath a beautiful, beautiful black tree. The night turns itself like a horse's mane, brushing along the side of the day and covering it with dark hues. What you'll notice about that, what's really exciting about that, is that the entire choir starts to imitate a South American band, perhaps a mariachi band is what comes to mind, with it having a bass. The basses will sing. The altos and the tenors will switch between chakuruku, 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 and they alternate so that together it sounds chaku chakuruku, chakuruku, chaku chakuruku, chakuruku, chaku chakuruku, chakuruku, imitating the shakers that are going on in the texture. And above that, just like a trumpet, beeling, bling, bling, beeling, beeling, bling, bling, beeling, beeling, bling, bling, beeling, bling, beeling, bling, bling, beeling, bling, or maybe it's a thumb piano that's going on. I don't know why that would be in a mariachi band, but it kind of sounds like that. Either way, as we enter into our own night, hoping to drive safely to our homes, we escape into the world of reality, thinking of Canta Claro, that beautiful, beautiful rooster, thinking about the night, bathing the day, and thinking about sharing our stories of this event with each other. This is the program. This honors my family, and the hope is that the presentation we offer you tonight will honor each and every one of yours. Thank you.